55. What a kick. Saw Cameron poking out the back. Got the body. The mark and the play on is brilliant.
Oh, Gunston was superb. Shut the gate. Goal, Brisbane.
Look at this. Bailey, as easy as you like, makes it a 35-point lead. Siren sounds to complete the game, and Brisbane make it 5 wins on the trot.
It is the the Brisbane Lions Fancast back after round 8. Prime time viewing. The Lions and the Blues Friday night, Marvel Stadium. JB and Patrick at it again to have a discussion about what went on, what's going to be coming forward, answer some of your questions, have a look at what's going on in the twos, and a general chinwag about things going on in the world of the AFL. You're back. You went to the game on Friday night. How was it?
It was a pretty good experience. It was finally amazing to see the team perform in probably the best kind of overall performance I can remember. Just as you're saying there, it's probably at least both parties are happy on our podcast, not on Josh Dunkley's podcast. Sorry, Adam Treloar, your hamstrings were a ticking time bomb, just like Dangerfield's. So I'm sorry if you're going to run around like a lunatic. Don't do a podcast.
I'm sure they'll get to that, but I'm also sure that he'll be heaping plenty of praise on his best mate, who, as Fague said, had one of the great games he's ever seen. And I'm sure we will get to that in due course, and especially when it comes to votes later on in the show. But as you said, very much our best performance of the year, and potentially for 18-odd months. At the back half of last year, finals aside, was very up and down. And this was a very complete performance by the entire team. Defensive structures were spot on. Pressure was right up. Goal scoring ability up there again. Charlie back at it again. Zach hitting the scoreboard with a couple of Joe the Gooses out the back. I think Gunston had a sneaky good game. Kicked 1 or 2 himself, but set up at least 2 or 3. The key forwards were mighty, as they have been over the last 4 or 5 weeks, working up the ground, crashing packs, creating contests. Nothing but positive things to say about this week, really.
No, the game looked like it was going to go in a completely different direction sort of midway through the first quarter. I was sitting there kind of losing my mind at the idea of a shootout. Bit of context for the non-game goers. Pretty packed. So general admission was sold out. Members were less dense. So it was an odd situation where basically, for those of you who haven't been to Marvel Stadium, basically sort of in the top tier where general admission is, or bottom, I don't know. I don't like bottom, so I don't really know what that realm is like. But credit to all the Lions fans down there that absolutely made a raucous mess of everything. So top tier, you have your members allocated seating, and then you have general admission from sort of row X to row Z. That was completely packed to the point where there were children and stuff hanging out above the top row in the weird ratway gutters.
I do know those, yes.
Because there are parts of the seating next to where the commentators sit that you just can't see the goal square, so people don't sit there. Absolutely sardine packed. So more people than you can fit in a certain area. When Charlie Curnow had his name called out, it was I imagine this is what the Beatles were like when they first went to America. My eardrums were slaughtered by the screaming banshee-like qualities of the 12 to 16-year-old female contingent, which continued every time he went near the ball. And I just want to say, before we go into anything, thank you, Jack Payne, for limiting that influence, because I don't think my ears would have been the same. And this is someone who's played the drums for 20 years. I didn't have it in me. But also it was so packed that it was well, we can't move. What are we supposed to do? So, yeah, bigger than the Beatles, maybe.
How was the Lions contingent in the fans on Friday night? Because on the broadcast, it certainly seemed like it was Carlton heavy, and that's to be expected. But during the third quarter, those numbers diminished.
Yeah, it definitely was the sort of thing where it faded pretty quickly. About halftime, I think a lot of the Carlton fans knew. Carlton fans are odd because there's a level of warmth about them until you play them and you realise that they're pretty fickle. And they're not very the old blue baggers community. They're actually pretty fickle. Hence why there was the exodus, which I was amazed they brought up on the broadcast. That was like one of my main talking points, was the fact that like 2/3 of the people that were there to watch them got the fuck out pretty quick. And it was so funny. So there was a kind of a stadium wide like na 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 hey hey going on to go with like the plethora of lines. There was even a Brisbane chant going up at Marvel. Fancy that. There was an absolutely raucous section up the top that I think one of our Discordians was sitting in that were just like going nutballs. So it was fun. Yeah, it was great.
I mean, not only did they bring it up in the broadcast, they made like a point of just constantly flashing to Carlton spectators either walking out. They could have just been going to the dunny or getting some chips for all we know, but they were certainly walking up the stands, and that was all it took. And then the fourth quarter, a noticeable difference in crowd size that BT brought up again, to the point where it even got brought up in Michael Voss's presser at the end of, hey, you know, like, you've got your own fans booing you and leaving at third quarter. What are you going to do about that? And what's Vossi going to do other than just say, yeah, we got to start winning some games of football? But I kind of understand it. Like, they've been through it for the last 20 years. Every year it's like, yep, now we've got the list. Now we've got the coach. Just you wait. Finals this year, only be let down again. And then more often than not, a wooden spoon for their troubles at the end of a season. So it must be frustrating to be a Carlton supporter, especially this year when not just Carlton supporters, but I guess a large portion of the AFL community is getting behind you to go, yeah, look, you're primed. You've got the list. You're ready to go. You only just dipped out on finals last year. Like, top 8, top 4 is a genuine possibility for you. And then I wouldn't say it was a disappointing performance from them, but they just got outplayed by us, and they have by teams like Adelaide and others throughout the year as well.
Yeah, it was a funny one. Like, I listened to SEN on the way home, and there was a lot of like vitriolic callers about the Carlton performance. And whilst I kind of understand the compounding frustration of what was going on, it seems like an odd hill to die on, the game against Brisbane, who I just think, like, you know, you and I were pretty worried early on in the season with the certain signs. I think tactically this was one of like Fagan's best games in the way the team set up, and bloody Lee Montagna like stole all my talking points on First Crack last night of how we set up to basically mean that they couldn't do anything. But it's like they got so tactically taught a lesson that it made Carlton look way worse than they were. It's almost as if they were like, they couldn't handball the ball to each other or kick it on these talkback radio things. And it's just like, oh man, like you're not understanding that you're playing one of the like top 4 teams in the competition. You know, would they have the same reaction if they got beaten by, you know, Collingwood or Melbourne like this, the fans? I don't know, maybe. But it was certainly an odd feeling of just like, you guys are you're really picking this one apart against a better team, aren't you? Like,
and I suppose it was our best game, but contextually it was one of our bigger games as well. You know, I pointed out a couple of weeks ago that this was one of our tougher games in that sort of 7-week stretch that we had coming up. Carlton at Marvel, like the questions have been raised for Brisbane, and you even brought it up yourself, maybe week 3 is like, are we flitting with the idea of being flat track bullies? And at the time I said, yeah, I suppose the evidence points to yes. This was an away game against a decent opponent, 2 of our more experienced players out, and it was our best performance. 3 of our last 4 games have been away, but they've been North, GWS. This was the one that sort of, as Fagan said, it was sort of like an 8-point game in many ways because it did separate us from a team like Carlton.
I did love that. I love the way that he said it was an 8-point game, sort of.
Yeah.
Like, just to kind of add a little bit of salt to the wounds of the fact that there is a quality gulf between Carlton and the Lions. And I think maybe that's why there was such frustration from the Carlton fans, is that that quality gap in quality was just made abundantly clear. But
well, I think so. I think it was like it was an audit for both teams. It was an audit for Carlton to see where they stack up against, as you said, a top 4 team, and it was an audit for us to see where we stack up against a contender to an extent, like a finals quality team away from home. Can we play the football that we showed we can play away from the Gabba?
I do also think there's elements in Carlton, you know, talking about their list is lopsided, but there are there's qualities within that list that has damaged us previously. Not so much like, yes, within Carlton, but within the styles of players. So players like Cripps, the two talls, run off half back, things like that have been kind of at various stages kind of kryptonite for our Lions. And to see us kind of like tick every single one of them off in terms of like, none of the things that normally would have hurt us.
Yeah.
So it was, we'll get into that, but the last quarter kind of wish that we wouldn't just like, we didn't have to leave. Let the Carlton fans leave.
Yeah.
So
that is that's been sort of typical Brisbane for a while now, and it was brought up in the Discord. Aside from North Melbourne, we've never really been able to put away teams, and the opportunity was there for us after a 5-0 third quarter to really rub salt into the wound and get up towards like a 50, 60 point win. Couldn't get it done, let them back into the game, gave them a bit of a sniff. Joe sort of pushed it out, and then Eric to seal the deal at the end of it to hit that 100 points yet again. So we got the win. It's a 5-goal win in the end, and if you had said to me earlier in the week, you're going to win by 5 goals against Carlton and Marvel, Kerner's going to kick one, Mackay's going to kick one, I'd take that every day of the week.
Would you say that we're not putting teams away when we've won all the games that we've been fed?
Yeah, I mean...
I know what you mean. I'm being a dick.
But even we discussed it before we started recording today. That second and third quarter, especially the first 10 minutes of that third quarter, we left a lot of goals on the board to really just stamp our authority on it. Neil missed one, Dunkley missed a couple, Gunston sprayed one, and that's when we were playing our best footy as well. That sort of first 10 minutes of that third quarter, we just kept getting in our forward 50, locking it in there, but just couldn't put it on the scoreboard. And you sort of felt we only went in with a 10-point deficit at half time. If we go to all this work, don't put it on the board, and then they run it up the other end, get a goal on the board, suddenly that just undoes it all so quickly. But it didn't pan out that way in the end, but I still thought we left a little bit on the board there.
Yeah, the goal that they kicked just before halftime was a little bit unsettling at the time. But maybe we should take it back to day dot. So team news. This was a bit of I think it was probably widely controversial, sort of some unpopular opinions. I think in theory it worked better than it might have worked. So we had outcoming the 7 billion games of experience in Daniel Rich and Dane Zorko. This is a confusing one because they just named 2 in or 1 in. 2 in. 2 in? 1 in.
2 in, 3 out. Oh no, I don't know how.
So it was just Harry Sharp coming in for Zorko and Rich.
Yep.
So you're subtracting 500 games for 7.
Yeah.
So I guess that we knew then that Answorth was going to play, which I was happy with. Sharp was coming in, which, bit weird. How's that going to work? Didn't. And then our good old slow friend Jared Lyons on the sub bench.
Yeah, I think my first reaction was very similar to a lot that I saw on various social media platforms was, what are you doing choosing Harry Sharp? You've got 2 players that I think most people would have thought, it's the 3 names we brought up last week, Answorth, Pryor and Dev Robb were the 3 names that we thought they were going to choose from, and then in comes Harry Sharp out of nowhere. It's not like he's been blowing it up in the 2s. His last game that I saw him play was woeful, and the first 2.5 quarters of this game was very much the same. The more I thought about it, he did warm into the game and sort of started doing a few little good things in the third and last quarter. But the more I thought about it, he's obviously a hard-running, fast-running wingman. They've got 2 very decent wingmen in Ollie Hollins, albeit in his first year, and Blake Acres. And Acres had a great game for him. Maybe this was just a horses for courses type operation. This is why we're bringing Sharpie in, but It was a bold choice.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting one where on one wing you had like Hollins and Sharp kind of negatively affecting both of us. They both got a goal. Neither of them really got a great deal of the ball. And then on the other wing you had like Akers and McCluggage and Berry kind of getting everything. So whether that was like the lopsidedness of it all, I didn't mind the idea of Hollins and Sharp going head to head. They probably played the same amount of games, all things considered. I don't want to judge Harry Sharp too harshly because I think it'd be really hard to play 7 games over 3 seasons, particularly when you've got like a reputation of like winning the AFL Draft World Championship running by like 7 minutes or something. I don't know, what was it, 20 seconds?
Yeah, he
won
took
the 2K
20
title.
seconds off the 2K tile, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's like superhuman exoskeletal stuff going on. It's odd because, we spoke and sort of said, like, Zorko and Rich are probably going to be out for at least 3 games. Maybe they might maybe sit out until the bye.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That game against Adelaide before the bye, depending on where they're at and where we're at, if it's a break glass in case of emergency, bring them back. But I wouldn't be surprised if we take them through to the bye if we're still coasting.
Yeah, if we're X and 2
yeah,
heading into that Adelaide game, they don't play for me. But I thought it would be a good chance to, like, give Pryor a run for a number of games because, Answorth, he has spent a lot of time in the team consistently when he was fit last year and a couple of years before, whereas Pryor and Dev have had less substantial periods of time in the team. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Sharp stays in the team. I think there's more value in keeping him in going forward than to just sort of be like, well, you played one game, you were a bit crap in the first part of the game where you got caught holding the ball. I thought it was interesting. Like, I barely noticed him on in live, but I noticed him much more in the broadcast, and he had like surprising proportion of like contested possessions to normal. So he wasn't exactly winning easy ball when he did. He might have only finished with about 10 or 11 touches, but I think 7 or 8 might have been contested if you can source me that.
Yeah, 13 touches, 11 kicks, 2 handballs. Yeah, like I said, I agree with you. I think he'll hold his spot just for continuity purposes. I don't know that Essendon have super damaging wingmen to the same way that Carlton does, but I'm also not horribly familiar with Essendon's list back to front. I know McGrath can sort of play everywhere, but he's either inside or half back, so I'm not sure if there's a job to be done there. But touching back onto what you said, we sort of ticking all those boxes, the way we played Adam Sard, and a lot of people would have thought Berry would be the one to go to Cripps, but it was Dunks, and not only did he have a blinder of a game himself, but kept Cripps to, well below his standards. It was just fantastic in every single way. But the way we played Sard particularly, always just having someone that was dedicated to running with him so he wasn't getting those cheap handballs and just woofing it down the line, was really good.
That was well and truly winding the crowd up something chronic. They were baying for 50-metre penalties, and they were trying to buy them as well. They were trying to push people over the mark, push people into the kicker and things like that to try and like buy these 50-metre penalties. It was like, you do realise that if there's a guy there can be a guy there. Like, that's the rule. It was expertly done, and the ability to roll through and for it to be like literally anybody was really funny. But yeah, that was a bit of a masterstroke. I don't know if you want to do something funny, if you want to jump on the Brisbane Lions YouTube channel, just quickly indulge me this. Speaking of Josh Dunkley, and have a look at the thumbnail for Josh Dunkley's press conference midweek and the caption.
Dunkley full of confidence?
Dunkley full of confidence with his smirking little grinning face. He knows exactly that he's about to have a bloody breakout game and dominate Fritzio Cripsio. That popped up just in my feed like yesterday, and I was like, I couldn't stop myself having a giggle. So thought I'd bring that up because it was, that's art imitating life there. So
well, there you go. So I think you could be the first person to sort of unironically call a YouTube thumbnail art.
Yeah, too right. Forward thinking.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a chat about Dunks here. As you said, best game for the club. 13 tackles, 33 touches, kept Cripps to absolutely nothing. I mean, his overhead marking for a midfielder is just something ridiculous. 6 clearances. It is a complete performance for a guy that has been plugging away, putting in solid performances every single week, but this is the one that really stood out in so many different ways.
Yeah, I must admit, I didn't like, when he was at the Bulldogs, he was part of the who the hell are they kind of crew. Like, I know there's a lot of them, but it's kind of like, oh, there's Bontempelli, he's gigantic. And like, oh, it's Treloar, he's got blonde hair and was from Collingwood. And then it's like, who the hell is Jack McRae? Like, he falls into that Josh Kelly territory for me. And I must admit, like, Dunkley, no idea. So has he played a better game even at the Bulldogs? I don't know. Fight me. I don't think so.
I mean, there's every possibility. He's been, playing AFL for a long time, but these games, no one's going to remember this game in 3 weeks' time. If you're not a Lions supporter, it's just standout performance, fantastic, and he's obviously going to get the 3 votes, I would imagine, this week, and the 10 coaches votes as well.
Some of the tackles were pretty brutal as well.
Yeah.
Like in a good way. I loved the one he did on Sam Walsh, where Walsh just looked like some sort of like kind of farm animal that's like, well, I guess I'm getting shorn now, like some sort of sheep that's just like knows it's like, well, my wool is now forfeit. It was so like his face is so funny, but 13 tackles.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And also like not just like kind of like wussy tackles, like proper tackles.
If you've got a mate that loves the Lions, tell them to get the podcast into their ear holes.
Should we move on to Payne Train?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, we thought he had his best game for the club against the Giants, and he did, but that didn't last long because, my word, I didn't even realise, and this was such a throwaway line from David King throughout the week, and I can't remember in what context I heard him say this because he's on so many different platforms and programs and stuff, but he just threw this line away. He was talking about Aliir and the impact he's having for Port Adelaide and the intercept marks and stuff, and he just threw this out there. He was like, he's got X amount of intercept marks. The only person that's got more is Jack Payne. And that just sort of stood out like, why isn't anyone talking about Jack Payne then?
Yeah.
And
so
because
that I believe was on Wednesday night 360.
Yeah,
so
very possibly. And then I looked it up. He's number one intercept D50 marks. He's up there with best key defenders. He's having compared to someone like Stephen May, tallying him up in terms of stats, who is the incumbent All-Australian defender. So if he keeps this up, there's no way he's not our All-Australian defender. I was having a quick think about it last night. In the All-Australian team, I'd have 2 Lions in at the moment in Charlie Cameron and Jack Payne at this stage. Probably no standout midfielders or anyone else at this point, but there's 15 weeks left of footy, so there's no point really musing about that at the moment. But my word,
I think as far as our 2 key defenders go, like Payne's, he's there, and Harris is definitely like Harris kind of showed everybody that he can still one-on-one defend pretty bloody well. McKay didn't get a sniff. Kerno worked up and tried, but you called it, man. You said Payne's got the athleticism to go with him, and he went with him, and he gave him heat. He made Kerno earn anything he got. The only one time I think Kerno got the goal was when
Froggy
Payne had gone off him to McKay, and Frog was on him, and the ball was about to go inside 50, and I was like, oh, shit, mismatch here. And he almost got there but didn't quite, and still Kerno had to earn it. But I think between the 2 Carlton tools, they kind of got taught a bit of a lesson in work rate, which is interesting because going back, I think, to 2019, the game where we got dusted before the bye at Marvel.
Yep. By Patrick
that
Cripps.
That day, McKay and Kerno ran Gardner and Harris completely ragged in the first half, to the point where I think I turned to like a bunch of Carlton mafia behind me and was like, because it was tight, I think at halftime we might even have been ahead.
Yeah.
And I was like, these 2 have been running so much, and you watch, and I think they kicked 1 million goals in the second half. It could not have been more different. Like, there was no work rate from either of them. It was really odd. Whereas Lee Montagna played the clip of where Hipwood tackled Hollins in the pocket. Obviously, there was a bit of emphasis on the way we were set up behind that to enable that to happen, so he didn't get a kick around. But he sprinted like 100 metres in like a serpentine S all around the front of the goal and got the tackle. It's like, he didn't see the other 2 doing that.
No, and he made a point of also pointing out McKay's positioning, which was 40 metres behind where it should have been to allow Ollie Hollins to kick that ball down the line and give them an outlet. So I thought, once again, the key forwards didn't have a huge impact on the scoreboard, but it's their work everywhere else that is really standing out at the moment. Hipwood he's having quiet games numbers-wise, but he's so noticeable in the way that he's approaching each and every contest, and it was really good for him to get that goal at the end, just as a reward for all the hard work he's put in through the game.
Yeah, I think I said before, like it was good threefold for me. There was the reward for him, us hitting 100 points, which is always fun, and also just, him and Danaher scoring more goals than McKay and Kerno is always funny. He's unfortunate because he got hit earlier on in the year with those articles. It was sort of like he's the worst ranked on average like forward.
Yeah, that's right.
Since the dawn of time or whatever, and it's like, yeah, there's a bit of context to go around with that, Mr. Hoyne. When you're playing as a key forward in a awful team, like the only key forward too, because it was like around that whole sort of Jack Rewalt, Richmond, one key forward with a Mozzie squad. And then the players that were around him was like Jono Freeman. Like, of course he's going to have quiet games as like a 19-year-old key forward by himself. Like, yeah. Anyway, so, and even these ones, they're not going to rank well on like champion data, but like the intangibles are there. And also like, yeah, I admit like probably coaches might look at data sets and stats and whatever, but if you've been told to do certain things within a role and you hit the metrics that your coaches are asking for, the other stuff doesn't matter. Like the context around data sets and stats is like, yeah, as fans, we can know like, oh, really, a lot of disposals is good. Like, that on the AFL app, I've got like fantasy points turned off mine because they don't matter. Like, you can lose by 60 points and have the highest rated player on the ground, but it's like, well, what happened? So probably didn't get a lot of fantasy points, but he was massive.
He certainly was.
And he kicked the goal. He kicked the goal at the end. So awesome.
Well,
he needs to sort his hair out. His hair's weird.
Well, for context, Link McCarthy, who we both agree is one of our most impactful players, had the second worst fantasy points on the ground on Friday night. It was one of his quieter games.
He was probably just sore from the week before.
True, and didn't see him in the long sleever, unfortunately.
No, that's one of my gripes of the game. I understand we're under the roof, but it was bloody cold, and there were multiple opportunities. No Link, no Chuck, no Answorth. Long sleeves. At least we saw some long sleeves in the VFL, but we didn't see the red. So is that really a win?
One of Ashy's quieter games, unfortunately for him. But I mean, kid's still young and he's working his way into the AFL. He's not going to light up each and every week. He'll be back over the next couple of weeks, you'd have to imagine.
It was fine. Did he go kind of head to head with Walsh?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, you learn, and Walsh is a pretty hard runner both ways. Gets a lot of balls, so. If you're performing like that, and there are players that are, not performing to their potential, like Neil as well, but it doesn't really matter. Like it's all good.
You're right, and it's stuff we've been saying throughout the week. Is like we don't need players to have those Josh Dunkley style games. I mean, yes, it's a bonus and it's nice when it happens, and we can talk about it till the cows come home. But we don't. The beauty of bringing in those two specifically, Ashcroft and Dunkley, and having 10 odd players we can roll through the midfielders. We don't need Neil to be getting 30, 40 touches each and every week. So he can afford to have 20 this week, still impact the contest, still get 6 clearances, and still come away with
one
a decent
of the most
win.
fun tackles in the broadcast where he came from row Z to just smash someone. But, I mean, you've said it as well, but Cripps is their barometer, and he got shut down, and look what happened. So if you've got an ability where you've got players that can win matches, and we've seen already that Ashcroft has the propensity to turn a match. Neil, obviously. Dunkley has now shown us he's got that ability. We've got a lot of match winners, and also match winners that are willing to just do grunt work when it's not their turn to win the match. I thought Rayner was a bit like that. He seemed to have a bit of a frustrating night, but he was still putting himself in there all the time, creating contests, smashing into people, unsettling. So it's fine. Like, have an off day. It doesn't matter. It's not even really an off day because the team's won, and I'm sure that they're chuffed with that in lieu of their own performance.
100%. And even Charlie Cameron, who's playing arguably career best footy at the moment, it's his pressure and tackling and stuff that is making the most difference rather than his 4 goals.
And I think that probably what's nicest about that is his admittance to that, like, post-game. Saying like that's the important thing. Maybe it's just makes him seem nicer or something like that.
How's the way they were asking him, Brownie and the like were asking him about goal celebrations and stuff, and Chuck didn't.
They brought up Fagan.
Yeah, Chuck wouldn't admit it. Chuck wouldn't admit it, but he'd obviously been told after he was counting goals off on his finger that maybe dial it back a little bit there, mate.
Yeah, look, I don't know. As long as it's not the bloody bow and arrow, I'm sound. Bring out the shotgun.
There's only one person that's got the license. Oh, there's 2 people in the AFL history that got the license for the shotgun.
The original one and then the usurper, but I'll take the usurper. So, second and third quarter, man, like they kicked one goal. We talked about, their one goal came just before halftime, which kind of put a bit of fear in you. But yeah, we were, I suppose, a bit flagrant in front of goal, and then kind of dusted them off pretty good before 3/4 time, which led to the heading for the exit.
Yeah, wow.
Fun. And as far as anything else really with the game, there's not really too much to say. Kadeem Coleman came off with cramp, apparently.
Yeah, I thought that was a smart move.
In you. And Jared Lyon came on to get a goal assist, and aside from that, his one goal assist from the game, which is sort of what he's done every time. And that's about it.
Yeah, I thought O had another fantastic game. Like, he's just going about his work each and every week and just battling it out the whole game, taking 80% of the ruck work, getting clearances. He's marking down up and down the wings, dropped off a little bit, but like he's lifted in so many different ways.
Yeah, it sort of seems like he's just got a bit of a different kind of ruck role with the way the forward structure is now. So there's less necessity for him to go rest forward. It's almost like he's playing as almost like a sweeper in behind, like, for the ball coming the other way, which is cool. Like it's keeping the forward line clear, which is sort of something that I'd been asking for early in the season, to let the smalls go to work. So I don't know. It was pretty well perfect, except for kind of just like the random goals they got from like Dunkley taking an awesome mark and then kicking it to Andrews under his leg and weird stuff. But who really cares?
Like the show? Make sure to follow and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms.
All right, let's get to some votes. I think the 3 should be obvious, with Josh Dunkley the 3, Jack Payne the 2. Really stiff. That gets 3 votes most other weeks. And I'm going to give 1 to Klug, who it was his best game for the year. It was a good game. I'm not even going to say, he could have done this or that better. I think it was somewhere back to near his best. And maybe that comes at the expense of Zorko being out of the team, and Klug can play that sort of role he's used to playing a little bit more, use the ball well, and just a great game from Klug. So that should do his confidence a world of good.
A good shout. I got the same Dunkley, Payne. I went for Berry from what I could see at the game. So that's my live votes. Broadcast I gave to Charlie, because I didn't realise, the pressure's there, but the pressure was so much more immense on the TV. So I've given myself 2 1 votes. So okay. I don't know if that means anything. We're not even counting these. So
I was going to at some point go back through the archives and do a little bit of a tally. But yeah, sure, you can give out 2 1 votes there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird alternate reality part. But I guess, I thought Berry was really good at the game. He was everywhere. And then on the telecast, it was like, oh yeah, there he is. Shit, 29 disposals.
Yeah, it did sneak up on us. Any changes you're going to make to this lineup as we go back home to the Gabba and take on SNL on Saturday night?
No, other than the sub.
Yeah.
I think you can't look at what Kennedy did coming off as a sub. I think it was 11 or 12 disposals and a goal for an inside mid, mind you, and compare that to what came on for us. We need someone with a bit of up and go. Like, have we been in a position where we put Jared Lyons on and improved within the game?
No, I don't believe so. He's only ever played 10 minutes max, basically. But if we're going to put an inside mid on, I'd be more inclined to put Reece on, just because if it's a similar position and you're going to get that enthusiasm, Reece is going to come out like a bull at a gate and just do whatever he can in that 10 minutes.
I guess the thing I don't understand is a lot of the goals didn't necessarily come from inside mid stuff. It's sort of just the contested ball got out and then it was sort of the run, but I can't really remember because I didn't really care at the time. But it's you don't need another inside mid almost ever unless one dies.
Yeah.
And even then you've got other people that can play that. So I don't really see it. I don't get it. I watched probably a half of the VFL the following day. So should we segue that into a little bit of a VFL checkup?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think the only change I would potentially make would be Sharp, but I think he'll get another game. So yeah, change to sub. Jacko Pryor or Cal Archie, just for that versatility, as we say each and every week. So we'll see what we see. It'll more than likely just end the same.
Yeah, do you think there's an element of like the fact that we kind of know that Pryor, like Matho, Dev Robertson, like they can all kind of contribute on an AFL level, and we sort of know that. We're not sort of sure about Sharp, and giving him a run of games could really hold him in much better stead in the long term.
There's that. I mean, there's a couple of theories floating around, and you know, a lot of people, when they saw that Pryor or Dev weren't selected, you know, it was just like, well, you've basically signed their death warrant. You've basically signed them over to West Coast at this point, or, you know, West Australia or another team.
I asked you the question, why would they want to go? But I guess if they want to play
games,
football, then
yeah. As simple as that. Get games. It doesn't matter if you're going to bottom out on the ladder. You're going to get AFL games. That's what you became an AFL player for, I would imagine. It strikes me as weird that we went out of our way to move up the draft order specifically to get Dev Robertson to play Harry Sharp over him. And it sort of begs the question, do you play your best team each and every week to get wins, or do you play players that you know are going to hang around? Because, I mean, you could potentially boil it down to that. We're not playing Dev because we think he's going, and what's the point of giving him free games if he's going to bugger off at the end of the year?
Yeah, I guess it sort of feels like they're almost doing something kind of in between. So it's not necessarily playing Sharp because Sharp will always be here, but more like when you're in a position where the team structure's going well, you can play players to sort of try and, like, I guess, integrate them within the system and within the team at a certain level. I think that Pryor's going to come in and generally be pretty consistent. Dev Robertson is pretty good. I don't think he's really played to his potential, but maybe that's because he hasn't had a run in games as well. Watching him in the VFL was a bit weird. He got a lot of the ball and was a bit kind of not great with it.
Yeah, his ball use has always been his question. It'll probably hang over his head, but that's the sort of stuff that maybe game time will fix. And maybe they're just going, yeah, we'll get you game time, but in the twos. Come back when you can use the ball potentially, but by that time maybe it's too late. But it's folly to think that we can just hold on to all this top end talent and that they're not going to want to seek opportunities elsewhere. Cash and game time.
Do you think that Rich and Zorko play on next year?
I think it depends. If we win the flag, no. If we fall agonisingly short again, they might toy with the idea of playing on another year, and the coaching staff might as well if they think there's a spot for them. It also depends on how they go this year, if their bodies hold up. I mean, Rich has already been out twice with soft tissue injuries. He might...
Zorko started the year off injured as well.
So, yeah, that all plays into it. And if they can take extended periods off and we can cover those losses, then, you know, list management might not offer them another contract like they did with Mitch Robertson.
I don't think they play on either way, because I think it's sort of we were talking about it with Fagan and Tasmania thing last week. It's like if we fall short, they're probably symptomatic of why.
Yep.
I know that's possibly unpopular, and like, don't get me wrong, these guys like have been there forever and through some really, really awful times. And you know, whenever the first premiership, if it comes in this sort of group of years, it's built on the back of that. There's a few very key people that will be to thank for that.
I still think they're both in our best 22. Yeah,
I don't think they will be for long. I think it's in a transitionary point.
It also depends on who we're playing as well. I think the Bulldogs game, we really missed Daniel Rich. This Carlton game, I don't think suited Daniel Rich as much, especially in that first quarter where it was just pinging all over the place. I think it was probably moving a bit too fast for Richie. It would have suited Zorko, but the Bulldogs game, I think we definitely could have used Daniel Rich. So
I think it's interesting over the next few weeks of them both being out. It will kind of show whether it's a fallacy that they're in our best 22. Like, I think Zorko, the way that he's played this year, is our best 22. I think Rich looks a lot better when our team's under pressure.
Yep.
So when we're not playing as well, he tends to play very well. He gets a lot of the ball. But I don't know if they're both in our best 22. And I think it's kind of like, there could be other people that if they played, and it's like, you know, it might not be like, oh, there's a 60-meter bomb forward, but like a lot of other stuff happens, or, you know, contribute. The team might play better without him, you know. And like, I'm not saying get out of here. I don't think they'll go on. There's a little bit of unreliability to it. Sort of a bit like the Dangerfield thing. Like, Dangerfield's obviously been lighting it up for Geelong, and it's sort of like, well, this is his death rattle, and that hamstring's about to go pop, which I said about 2 weeks ago, and here we are. And I think if I was Dev, Rob, and Pryor, I'd be saying, hey, are Zorko and Rich going to be sticking around? Are you going to put them on next year, or are we going to get playing time next year? That would be that'd be what I would ask sincerely to see whether there's actually a realistic future at the club.
You're probably right there. Whether they have the foresight and maturity to be having those sort of frank discussions at the young age that they are, or whether they just like, me want game, me want money. And at some point, you've seen it happen to lists all over the competition. We can't afford to be keeping all this top end talent. Like Neil's taking a good portion of the salary cap, Joe's taking a good portion, Charlie would be on a fair amount, Dunks would be earning a fair amount. We had to re-sign Clark and Rayner last year or the year before, so they would have had a bit of a pay increase as well. So, we can't afford to be like shelling out money to keep players like Pryor and Rob, who at this point are depth players. I mean, obviously at this point depth players with the view to potentially being starting 22 next year, but they're going to demand a pay increase if they want to hang around as well. So, we're going to have to make some concessions at some point.
Yeah, I suppose that's where I don't really know anything about pay structures or salary cap or anything like that. But, you would assume as well that Zorko and Rich are probably quite well paid within the club. Would you not?
Oh, they wouldn't be in the top sort of 10 or 15, I would have thought. They'd been earning a decent wage, but I think they're at points in their careers where they would have had the conversations to say, hey, we need you to take a bit of a pay cut so we can afford to sign someone like Joe Danaher or Josh Dunkley. And they probably would have said, yeah, okay, fair enough. Let's go get a flag though, I suppose.
So back to that VFL game, they had a win.
Slugfest in the wet.
There were some long sleeves out there. We had 5 at one point. We had Archie, Cockatoo, some guy in defence, Daryl White's son, and someone else, I guess. But fun. Obviously, I didn't go to the game because it was freezing, and also it was raining.
Pissing down.
Freezing and raining are not conducive to going to watch the twos. But I did watch a bit of it on the old computer. So watching Jared Lyons and Reece Matheson, they just stand around the stoppages yelling at each other. And pointing.
Yeah.
It's really odd. And then the ball goes directly to them. And then Dev Robertson is running around like a mosquito, and ball's going forward doing weird stuff. And Pryor's getting stuck into people. All good. There's some sort of weird new number 25 McStay guy that seems to be reasonably all right.
Henry Smith, yeah, he's been on the list a couple of years. He had a great game up forward. Fullerton, who has been kicking bags of goals over the last couple of weeks, was very quiet, no goals and 5 touches to his name. And Wiley Buzzer, the other forward, they played him down in defence. So it was largely up to Henry Smith as a key forward. 1 goal, 3. Lohman was good up front. And Darcy Fort, 23 hitouts, but also 21 touches to his name as well, and 10 clearances. He's had a bloody good game.
Yeah, feel a bit bad for him, but it's understandable collateral at this stage.
The VFL ladder is looking very Queensland heavy at the moment.
Yeah, what have we got?
So we've got Suns on top, who are also under...
Suns on top.
Yeah, 6-0, with a very healthy percentage of almost 174. We're in second, and then it's Box Hill, Casey, and then Southport and GWS are all in the top 8 of the Victorian Football League.
Makes you wonder what the hell's going on with Gold Coast and Box Hill. Just swap the Box Hill reserves team with the Hawks and they'll be laughing.
Well, having said that, bloody good to see Tom Berry get his first AFL game for the Suns on the weekend. Didn't have the greatest of games, but was instrumental with a cheeky little handball to set up that last goal for Malcolm Roses that almost got them the win against Melbourne on the weekend as well. So good to see Tom Berry playing some AFL football. Hopefully he holds his spot because the Suns played a bloody good game against Melbourne on Saturday.
Get in touch anytime. Shoot us an email at blfancast@gmail.com or join the Discord.
We've had some questions come through.
Let's do it.
On Instagram, and I'm going to lump these sort of two together, and we have basically touched on it throughout the show here. But Jono said, thoughts on Dev's lack of selection? And then Matt Hudson said, Harry Sharp experiment was risky, but good to give him a run in the firsts. He settled into the game well. So not so much a question, but more of an observation. Obviously Dev's lack of selection comes at Sharp coming into the side. We have sort of touched on it, but I still think Sharpie will hold on to his spot for what it's worth.
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about Sharp within the game. I think we did that before recording.
Yeah.
Although maybe I'm having a seizure. I don't know. I didn't notice him much at the game until sort of late on. And then watching on the broadcast, like he was more involved than I thought he was. He got caught early, I think just the pace of the game, and had an odd number of contested possessions. And he did win a lot of the ball out of stoppage almost.
Yeah.
And then kind of hack kick the ball forward. I think I remember like at least once him literally receiving the tap. And I was like, what the hell? He ran a lot defensively and offensively. And I think it was he was there to sort of do a job on Hollands. And I think, again, it's a similar situation where we're sort of talking about Wilmot the week before. I think there's a lot of learning to be had from these guys. He's played 7 games over the course of 3 seasons, or 7 or 8 or something like that. It's like not a lot of flow, I don't think. And that's, so I'd kind of keep him in for the next stretch until, probably until the bye. I'd keep him in unless something like he's awful, kicking goals for the other team in a way that is impossible within the rules of the game. I don't know. How do you find it? Like, I didn't think it was that bad. I saw a lot of a fair bit of flack, and it was sort of like, who cares? Like, when you win a game like that, it doesn't, the individual microscopic performance doesn't really matter. It's more of a macro level. So
yeah, I was, and maybe it was because I was looking for him to be bad, because I was generally upset with his selection to begin with, because I was gunning for Dev Rob like a lot of others were. But I did sort of...
I was gunning for Pryor.
Yeah, I did notice a few turnovers and stuff, and his first sort of 2.5 quarters was making me increasingly frustrated. But as Matty Hudson pointed out on Instagram, yeah, he did warm into the game well, and by the time that the final siren went, he did his best to butcher that one goal that he got, dropping a bloody dolly doctor in the goal square. Thankfully, he had enough time to recover and put it through. And then BT made a big point of like, well, why isn't anyone getting around him? It's his first AFL goal.
I agree with that. Yeah, I was a bit like, well, what's going on here?
Yeah,
come on, boys.
It was a bit strange, and I think maybe people thought it was not his first. Like, he's been on the list for a while. Surely he's kicked a goal, but no, that was it.
All I can say is probably lucky that Dunkley didn't kick his first goal in that game as well. Otherwise, that would have been a pretty weird disparity.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, I wish they'd. I think if he kicks another goal next week, it might be a slightly different kind of like, oh, we forgot your birthday last week. So let's give you a gigantic cake today. That might happen, so keep your eye on that. Yeah, it's interesting how sort of, I'm sort of team Pryor and your team Dev Rob, even though they're like kind of best mates anyway almost, so it's kind of funny. I still think that the two of them together do harbour that friendship bond, so it's a bit of a package deal. The West Australian Link McCarthy and Lockie Neal combo.
The other question we had was on Twitter from Delvis, who said, did Joe go from having the best hair in the AFL to the worst in just 1 week? And my answer to that is no. His hair was always awful.
Yeah, I mean, you got away with that on a technicality. His hair's worse than Dan Butler's. It's like Dan Butler's got the mullet in, but it's like he hasn't clipped it far enough back, so it kind of poofs out the side. And Danaher's got that. But like, the charming thing with Danaher, particularly when he played at the Gabba, was the fact that he looked like a 8-year-old with a mustache that had just gotten out of the bath, like with his like combed hair back.
It's always always wet.
Yeah, it is pretty dank.
Is that like a Buddy Franklin, Patrick Dangerfield oil? Like, no one can tackle my hair. It's that wet.
Yeah, well, he's got so much grippo everywhere else that he has to be slick somewhere. So grippo on his shorts, grippo on his blouse, grippo on his hands.
It's the first time YouTube has been referred to as art, and the first time a footy Guernsey has been referred to as a blouse in this episode.
Hey, just Danaher's is a blouse because it's enormous, one can assume. Yeah, look, it kind of made him harder to notice at the game.
Really? The big lumbering man with the strap shoulder booting goals from 60.
Yeah, shut up. But like, I don't know, it almost makes him more generic, which is insane given the insanity and absurdity of the haircut.
Yeah.
So did he go from having the best to the worst? He kind of went from having something pretty wildly slick to what the hell is that?
Yeah. Slick but shorter,
so maybe I'm with you.
Well, that was it for questions. You can always jump in on any social platform, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Join the Discord, of course. The links are all there for you to join in. or shoot an email through to blfancast@gmail.com. In terms of the goings-on in the world of the AFL, we touched on Tassie last week, and that's all done and dusted. 19th licence granted. 2028 is the year that's been sort of slated for them to come in, and I think everyone agrees. Fantastic stuff. Can't wait for that to be a reality. I did want to bring to you the equalisation. I don't know if it's a policy or strategy or whatever it was put in place whenever it was. But going into round 8, the bottom 3 teams were Richmond, West Coast and Hawthorn. Now they're responsible for 7 of the last 10 flags. Does that sort of show that the equalisation theory is working?
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
It is interesting because when you said that it was 7 of the last 10 flags,
Yep.
I wouldn't have told you that.
Well, I mean, those numbers are skewed. I guess Richmond with 3, Hawthorn with 3, and West Coast with just the 1 there. Melbourne Bulldogs and Geelong being the others missing in that 10-year period. But I think if you spoke to a Hawthorn supporter 2011, 2012 and just said, in the next 8 years, you're going to win 3 flags, but you're going to bottom out hard, and you're going to be in for, I don't know, call it 3 years of bottom 4 cellar dwelling. Would you take that? Would you take that trade-off, like the 3 flags?
Me?
Yeah, now. Front up payment.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I would have taken 3 flags back in 2001 if our team was going to be shit for 20 years.
And, well, yeah, that deal was done.
I mean, it could have been that. You could have bottomed out so hard that you bottomed out 3 times in a row before coming back.
I guess the difference is going to be, I don't think Hawthorn is going to labour down the bottom of the ladder as long as we did, just by being a big Victorian club, and they will attract suitors and they won't lose players. Like, if Will Day played for us in our garbage years, he's more likely to leave and go home than he is to leave Hawthorn. That's a big club that will be back up there before you know it.
Yeah, look, I think that, like, it'll be fine. It's the way that it's supposed to be designed. And, like, I think listening to something SEN related, I can't remember. It's kind of like when you win a flag, you've got 3 options. You sort of top up, you bottom out, or you trade to kind of make the bottom out not quite as hard.
Yep.
And I think it's almost like with West Coast particularly, their list management has been really, really poor.
Their rebuild hasn't even started yet.
No, because they've got this, like, I'm doing 4 inverted commas with my hands here. Top end talent. Like we were talking about it before. No one's taking anyone in that team. Like maybe Tom Barras, maybe Ryan of the premiership players.
Yeah.
Like Yo, Shuey, old McGovern, Hearn. Like they're all old. Like Darling. Like they can't move. Nat Nui. So they've like, it's almost a similar drop off style to after the Lions won 3 in a row. I was talking about this to my partner and I went through the Brisbane Lions list of 2006 and said, these are the players that were on the list. And it was like Voss and Ackermanis and Black and Power and Brown and both Scots. And it was like, this team won like 8 games.
Yeah.
And it's like the talent in that, but there was just such a huge drop off physically. So yeah, West Coast list management has been the thing that's let them down, not Adam Simpson, not necessarily their style of play. I think Hawthorn will be fine. Like they've got young talent and they're like, we've seen it. We had a horrible team, even in the, like, at least our horrible team started looking like a team when Fagan came in.
Yep.
And that's kind of where Sam Mitchell's at. Like at least their team are kind of doing something. It's really interesting how at the beginning of the year they were almost accused of tanking by like being so kind of like defensively horrible. And now like North Melbourne have been really bad. So it's like, well, are they being accused of tanking? I don't know. Footy media is really fickle, but like as far as Hawthorn and West Coast, I mean Richmond, people need to just sort of stop trying to make Richmond happen.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it is. And like Hopper and Taranto, yeah, fair enough. But like you've brought clearance players into a team that like wasn't a clearance team anyway. And it's kind of this year's sort of shown that turnovers, the way the game is sort of, the majority of the scoring is being done. If you can chip in with a goal a quarter from stoppage, that's like elite. So you're like losing your impact. You don't have any drive. Like defensively, like Richmond are just kind of pretty garbage. But people seem to think like they're still going to be awesome, and it's like,
I think their back end of the year, they'll bank some more wins. I don't think they're going to stay down that bottom 4 where they are now. I think they'll rise to sort of maybe 11th or 12th. I don't see them making the 8, that's for sure. Not from...
But people had them in their top 4 at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Like quite a lot of people had them in, and it's like, why?
They outperformed last year.
Yeah. They were dangerous. There was still a bit of like up and go about them, but like the recruitment doesn't make sense for me. Like,
and Shea Bolton was winning games off his own boot, and he had a good game on the weekend, but he's been a shadow of his form last year so far.
But it's almost like with a player like him, you need to have a structure in set to allow him to just go kind of bonanza crazy.
Yeah.
Like when your team structure's a mess, then it allows you kind of your X factor player. They don't have the guarantee of like get out of jailism to be able to do that. Think a bit Ackermanisy. Like,
yeah.
There's probably a lot of accommodations made back in the day for Ackermanis to do some pretty unworldly, filthy, awesome stuff on the back of like a really, really solid team. So I don't know. Yeah, but that's interesting. I wouldn't have believed it if you'd told me, and I understand it was distorted with Richmond happening to be in the bottom 4 at the time. But if you find yourself in the bottom 4, as we have at various times, you tend to deserve to be there.
Just to rub salt in the wound, Sandy Roberts the whole night called me Big Jeff Brown. Jeff, did he? Oh no!
You've got a nostalgic player for us this week. It's your turn.
I don't. So with the magic of editing, in a second I will. All right, with the magic of editing, the nostalgic player I picked is the small sauce, Todd Banfield.
I do remember Banner. I got a soft spot for Banners.
He was the perfect foil to the pre-fustercluck that was Favola and Brown. He kicked 1 million goals in the first at least 4 rounds of 2010. At the time, he got suggested to me as someone I might know on Facebook, which was really funny because that was the first time that had ever happened, where it was sort of like, I was like, what, Todd Banfield? We had a lot of red hair guys at that point in time, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I do remember once Banfield got traded on to Richmond and didn't show his face again. We got Josh Green in like almost straight away, and it's just like, well, in with one, out with the other. This guy hasn't got a beard, and maybe he's better, and he sort of was for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, does Josh Green have a more than 1 goal to game ratio?
Don't know. He went on to play a few seasons at Essendon as well, I believe.
Didn't he kick? I'm pretty sure he kicked a goal in that Marvel game or Docklands game at the time, I guess. A kind of coming of age game in 2017. He might have kicked a goal for them against us and celebrated like a goose. But we're talking about Todd Banfield. Yeah, I thought he was I think he was probably my favorite player for about 5 rounds.
Yeah, I remember at the time just full of hope with that one particular draft we got. We got Rockcliffe, Redden, and Banfield. I was like, oh yeah, we've just absolutely nailed this draft. And even Rocky, who, and it was an AFL quality player. He was captain of the club, but he was the only one that stuck around.
Do you ever get the feeling that Braden Maynard is just Rockcliffe's kind of
evil twin?
Yeah, evil, older, bulkier twin brother.
Yeah.
I can't unsee it, and it's pretty terrifying. Todd Banfield kicked 4 goals against Geelong in 2011.
He might be the only person that can say he did that in that year.
Yeah, clearly that's got to be the sign of an absolute genius player or a massive oversight by the Geelong defensive coaching structure, because they probably thought Fev was still going to turn up for that game. I don't know. Yeah, he was good. He was good for he played 3 seasons here and played 50 odd games, and then just sort of went off into the night. Got picked by Richmond in the rookie draft in 2013. Number 11, and one thing to note: pick 7, Adelaide picked Charles Cameron.
Wow, eh?
So how things could have been different had maybe Adelaide accidentally picked Todd Banfield.
Make sure you follow us on socials. Just search for BL Fancast.
Well, that wraps out our round 8 discussion. Our best win of the year. 5 on the trot, 5 weeks hitting 100 points, and a big win against the Blues. An away game, which is what we want to see. We come up against the Dons this Saturday back at the Gabatoir. I'll be there. If you are as well, jump in the Discord or just give us a shout out and get together for a skewy or something.
But I do want to leave you on one thing. You little beauty!